Last but certainly not least, Fendalton Waimairi. We'll need a room.
Last ones.
Right, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Councillors, for this opportunity to speak to our submission. I'll start off with our key issues, and the first one was the rates. We acknowledge you've got significant challenges, but we are concerned about the level of proposed rates increasing year on year, as identified in the plan. We have people that are asset rich and cash poor, and they are genuinely concerned about how they're actually going to manage to pay their rates. So it is a concern. We've also got one of the lowest decile areas in Christchurch, being Brynwa and Jelly Park, so it affects them as well. We thought that perhaps the AMI Stadium should be deferred, not in this long-term plan, but looked at after this long-term plan. And the asset sales, we know that they have to be considered to be sold in part, but we would like it to go, the assets sales to go to public service bodies as opposed into the private sector.
I prefer not to.
Or you would prefer not to for asset sales, but that's part of the debate, isn't it?
Mm.
Yes, yes. The capital program and the roads of national significance, that really affects our ward, and all the downstream road improvements we have to do on all our intersections coming into town, both on Herwood Road and Memorial Ave. Memorial Ave in one part is only 2 lanes, and there could be talk in future of 4-laning that part, which would cost the council a lot of money. I'm sure it's not in the near future, but it would have to happen sometime with the closing of Waimairi Road and Avonhead Road. We're putting a lot more traffic onto Memorial Ave. It's going to put a lot of pressure onto Memorial Ave, right into Fendalton Road and into the city, that entrance that way. And also Herwood Road will take a lot more traffic as well. The increasing the contribution of Greater Christchurch local bodies to the Christchurch City rebuild. We feel that some of the outer local bodies perhaps should be contributing to some of the rebuild things the city has to rebuild, and those councils are actually going to use, like the convention centre's not council, it's government, but like the Metropolitan Sports Centre and those sort of things that they perhaps will come in and use. So we feel that perhaps they could be contributing as well. The differential charging, I think that's relatively self-explanatory. And the level playing fields of the mobile coffee caravans in the city, we worry about those not having to pay rates, like the cafes that are moving into the city do have to pay rates. And it is not really a level playing field if you leave them at the post-earthquake rates that they have been getting, they should be going back to pre-earthquake rates, because those caravans can just come in on sunny days and busy days. They're really just picking the cream out of the market in that instance. And the residential red zone, we notice that there's a lot being expended on maintenance for the few houses that are left in that red zone, and it would be nice if Sarah could actually move those people out so the council doesn't have the cost of maintaining the roads and the infrastructure. I think that's about all. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to comment?
If they want to. Oh, yes, and we support Mike Moore's comments about the quarries. There is a huge problem out there with the quarries, and it will be ongoing. So, as much as can be done with the monitoring and whatnot, would be really good.
Yeah, I'm sure that you'll be supporting submissions to the hearings panel on the quarries chapter. All right. Do we have any questions? Yep.
Thanks, Val, and your team. Look, around the asset sales, I just see you've also made a recommendation that if assets have to be sold, there'll be some form of, you've got public service ethos or restriction, that be legally embodied. Just wondered if one of you might like to expand on that a wee bit, just to say how we might do that.
We sort of thought that perhaps some of the other local bodies could take up some of those shares in the assets, so they weren't going out just to the public. Is that what you really...
Yeah, that was the example that came up before. Orion's already 11% owned by Selwyn District Council. What's the problem with Selwyn picking up some more shares? And that would, I mean, you could always protect that interest by saying they could only ever come back. I mean, we have the first right of refusal on their shares anyway, so if they wanted to sell the 11% that they didn't want, we'd have the first right of refusal. At the moment, we wouldn't have the money to buy them, so we would actually end up seeing that disappear. So, and that would be problematic in my view.
The asset sale issue is so complicated that I don't think we totally understand how you're going to do it. So that's just our thoughts on it.
I think that what we've sort of said is that we can't possibly. I mean, we don't know what different shares packages are worth. I mean, obviously, if you sell control, then that's worth more money than if you per share than if you don't sell control. But there is a line, in Tauranga, the region of Tauranga, they sold 44% of their shares. At the time they sold, they were valued at $1.05 a share. Now they're valued at about $17 a share. So, I mean, the amount that the regional council gets for 44% of an asset is way more than it used to get for 100% of its asset. But I mean, there'll be other issues involved in all of that, and of course Tauranga's having an impact on our port with what it's done in Timaru. So we're faced with a number of risks, but and that's why we're thinking that perhaps rather than just debating yes or no on asset sales, are there some strategic opportunities that could actually grow the strength of the region as against some of those other things that are happening at the moment. Glenn?
Like Auckland Airport has brought a portion of Queenstown Airport.
Correct.
So they've got an alliance
and
now.
Somebody made the point earlier on about how we didn't want to be just on the receiving end of Auckland. Well, we're not even that. They're bypassing us altogether, and that is an issue. Glenn?
Thank you. This might stray into being out of order, but it's nothing too...
Well,
anyway,
look, it's the last submission of the evening, and if you're...
All right, I'll be really quick. Just a comment, followed by a question. I don't think we can legally remove people off the red zone land, and it was technically an offer anyway. But have you as a board discussed the concept of a flat water facility and whether you'd support that?
No.
Okay.
No, we haven't even discussed it, so we don't really have an opinion, unless any of the others do.
I think that, I mean, picking up on that red zone, because you're actually the ones that have raised this, about expending the costs that we're expending on the maintenance of services and infrastructure to a few properties, which is true, but actually that cost is coming off our horizontal infrastructure spend. The government's contributing X percent and we're contributing the other, so 60-40. But that's coming off the horizontal infrastructure agreement, you know, so, and I find that deeply disturbing because quite frankly, it's the method that was chosen by central government and they should be paying 100%. It shouldn't be something that the council's picking up at all. And I mentioned earlier on about how, you know, $15 million worth of social housing asset, which on a net basis in terms of what we got back from insurance is about $8 million, did not get transferred from central government to the council. So we're $8 million out of pocket, and I cannot for the life of me understand how on earth that was included in the cost sharing agreement. It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And I think that that all of these issues were always going to get surfaced in this long-term plan process. But I'm really pleased that you raised it. It does need to be addressed. The government's got an initial document out calling for people to submit on the development of a draft plan because they're doing a recovery plan now, X number of years down the track, to deal with the last remaining individuals, when in fact what they've asked for and the court has agreed to is the same payout as everyone else. And the point that I'm making is that people in that situation are not being you know, forced out of asked to settle with the government because they were uninsured or couldn't get insurance because they had empty sections. They're being asked to take up an offer simply on the basis that it's been red zoned. So it's actually the decision of the government that has put them in this position, not the fact that they were uninsured. If they hadn't been red zoned and were uninsured, Habitat for Humanity would have fixed their houses, as they've done for many uninsured green zone properties. And in fact, I went to one of those properties with the Governor-General, who hammered some nails into the wall as part of the total repair job that they did, free of charge, for people who were uninsured, not because they selfishly wanted to hold on to their money and to take the risk of being uninsured, but because the husband was in hospital for over 6 months and his wife couldn't afford to pay the bill. So there are real stories, real human stories behind the residential red zone, and I'm so glad that you raised it here because the people of Christchurch are having to pay the price anyway, and I think that all the government needs to do now is to make the offer the same as they did to everyone else. But that turned out to be a speech. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
But
I just get quite emotional about it
more.
because it just seems so unfair that people think that they've been, that somehow they're in the position that they're in because they wanted to be or desired to be or chose to be. The stories that I have heard about why people weren't insured. And the point is that with one person ready to start building next week, you know, the week after the earthquake, they are treated with a 50% offer for their land. People who started building the day of the earthquake are covered by the 100% offer. It's ridiculous. Yanni.
Try not to give a speech either, but the reason the council signed the cost share and gave away the red zone was because government offered to pay for building the convention centre. So that's the really simple answer. And but you're saying you want us to lobby government to conclude negotiations for the households, but are you aware that actually it's a voluntary offer? So even if government concludes its negotiations, those people still have a right to live there and to develop and get building consents. And, you know, so I'm just wondering whether you've thought about actually what you're asking and whether you're asking us for something
I think,
else.
Yanni, you'll find that the residential red zone recovery plan will actually address the whole issue now. in a way that the voluntary offer didn't. So that's, I mean, it's a technical legal issue at this point. Could I invite any of the board chairs that would like to come back and join us at the table? I don't know whether any of you would like to take the opportunity to come back, and we'll just have a final sort of 10 minutes and finish at 7:30, if that's all right.